as I hit record. So if for some reason you missed something or you would like to go through and listen to it again, I'll be sending out a link to this meeting so that you can view it at your leisure. Bio breaks are on your own, considering that we are on a Zoom meeting. So I have my herbal tea here, so just take care of what you need to when you need to take care of it. And if you have any questions, unless the presenter indicates otherwise, just put them in the chat and hopefully we will get them answered either now or later. And are there any questions before we begin?
I'm ready.
Great. Thank you so much for being here this morning on a Saturday morning. There's always a lot of competing activities for a weekend. And before we go through and review the basics of the General Assembly, I want to take a look at how GAE is different from the other state education organizations. And most of you know this already, but it's good to go through and tout our own organization. And before we do that, I am remiss. Lisa Morgan, you are supposed to bring greetings.
Okay, so thank you, Karen. Good morning, everybody. And before Karen starts talking about what she was going to talk about, that's one of the things. So thank you for being here. And actually, when Karen starts talking about one of the differences there, whoever I think I'm supposed to talk to about the differences between GAE and the other state organizations. Well, the fact that we're having this meeting and you are here this morning is one of the major differences, because we do get our members involved in the legislative process, and we do want our members to be informed and our members to be the voice of public education in our state. And no other group is going to do that. I was actually at a new teacher event yesterday in Barrow, and the reps from the other organization were like, oh, well, we have staff that are at the Capitol every day. And I'm like, no, we want educators to hear from the people in the classroom, the people driving the bus, the people in the cafeteria, the people who are actually working with our students every single day. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being that person willing to stand up and speak up for our students and our members.
Lovely introduction. Lovely greetings, Lisa. Thank you so much. And so GAE, as Lisa's alluding to, really is outstanding in the field, literally and figuratively, because when you join GAE, you're joining 3 organizations. And Lisa and I never rehearsed anything, but that was just so good about what you said about being at Barrow County yesterday. We are local. We do go through, and we are, as Jeff Hubbard, who's on this call from Los Angeles, so he can go through and watch the Georgia game in person on Monday night, knows we go through and we're at local school board meetings. And I have yet to be at a school board meeting where a local member from another organization, education organization, stands up, let alone speaks up. And then, also because of joining GAE, we have the national component. And again, the other organization, I'm trying to avoid the fine every time I say the word, doesn't have the national component. And because we are who we are, we differ from the other organizations in that we do endorsements of candidates. And so hopefully you have gotten over the last election cycle or over the years, GAE's member alerts. We did take a stance in the primary election. We had get out the vote rallies for the general election. And people tend to think that, oh, GAE only endorses Democratic candidates. This is not true. As a matter of fact, we've gone through and in this Red for Ed logo, as Lisa will say, Lisa, you want to say it?
It's not the R, it's not the D, it's about the E.
So we're not Republican, we're not Democrat, we are pro-education, a pro-education organization. And to that end, we have our political action committee. And this is a lot of information on the screen, but you'll notice in the second sentence that it is a committee comprised of 16 GAE members. The people who are making the suggestions, the recommendations for endorsements are not staff members. They are people elected to the GAE Fund for Public Education, or Political Action Committee, and they come from all across Georgia. So it's not that Lisa has a secret club on Friday evenings to go through and to make these recommendations. And the Political Action Committee and GAE are focused on education issues. We're not undertaking issues that don't impact educators, educational support professionals. And as it says in the closing paragraph, we are going through and working for Georgia's 1.8 million students for a quality public education. So, and you'll see the last sentence, GAE is the only major education association to have a registered political action committee. So the other organization, they don't take a stance on endorsing candidates. So, and the endorsing of the candidates is not a willy-nilly process. The candidates, all candidates who have qualified for office are sent a candidate questionnaire, not just the Democratic candidates, all candidates. They have to return the question, they have to fill it out. They have to return it before they get a candidate interview. Any one candidate who fills out the questionnaire is invited for an interview. And then after the PAC committee, the FPE committee goes through and interviews the candidate, those candidates who are found to be pro-public education, some of them are recommended to the board of directors for the board of directors to weigh in on whether or not that candidate should be endorsed. And then lastly, the FPE committee decides along with the board of directors whether or not there'll be a contribution to that particular campaign, a monetary contribution. So it's not as if we just go through and do this willy-nilly, as I mentioned. And if a candidate chooses not to participate, we can't do anything about that. We can go through and ask the candidate to submit the questionnaire and offer the interview. But if the candidate chooses not to participate in the process, then the candidate does not get the GAE endorsement. And as Lisa mentioned, we are a member-driven organization. Makes me proud. And you too, not this year because the deadline has passed, but if you wanted to offer yourself for service on the Fund for Public Education, you could do that. The nomination forms are in GAE Communications, the e-news, the No Magazine, etc. So you too could say, oh, I want to offer my name in service for the Fund for Public Education. And self-nominations are very much encouraged and appreciated, so don't be bashful. You could go through and offer your self for service on the GAE Board of Directors. Again, the deadline is in November. Self-nominations are wonderful. And we have at-large directors. As I mentioned earlier, I'm elected as an at-large director to represent retired. We also have educational support professionals. So you are a member. So please, if you feel so inclined, offer yourself for service in any of these positions. Because we, as I mentioned, are part of 3 organizations, including NEA, there's also the NEA Fund for Children and Public Education. So we did take a stance in the various elections and even in the runoff, and recommended Raphael Warnock as our candidate. And as you know, he was elected. So with us today is Jesse Evans, who's chair of the Legislative Committee. And we do have a set of legislative priorities for 2023 that when we go and lobby our legislators, we go through and have our marching orders. So Jesse, would you mind talking a little bit about how these priorities come into place?
I would love to. Thank you for having me. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm Jesse Evans, everyone. I'm chair of the GAE Legislative Committee with Clark County Association of Educators. This is going into my 3rd year of chairing the committee. I've been in the committee longer than that, but this is my 3rd year chairing it. Am I able to share my screen? Is that something I can do?
You can give me a nanosecond, please, and we will go through and I will make you a co-host.
Cool. So I'm a visual person in some ways. I think it's better for me to just show you what I'm referring to, so it's not just coming all audio.
Okay, you should be a co-host, Jesse.
Cool, thank you. So here is just a list here of kind of the general overview here of the process. Can you guys see the Google Doc I'm showing on my screen?
Yes, sir. Creation of GAE legislative priorities.
Perfect. So the first step in all this, I would say, would be the selection of a GAE legislative committee, which is done by the president. President Morgan has assembled the team each year that she's been in office, and prior to that, other presidents have done the same. She sent, and a request is sent out. The teams is geographically, it's spread throughout Georgia. We've got people of different professional backgrounds as well. We've had, teachers. We've had people who are education support professionals. We've had bus drivers. We've had counselors. So we're trying to get a really broad group of people, a diverse group of people to pull perspectives from. And it's going well. Since I've been on there, it's been I've seen a lot of really great diversity and perspectives. And then so the process of actually creating, once the committee is created, it's a member-driven process for creating the legislative priorities. We've done member surveys to survey the entire membership of GAE to figure out what educators and what members want us to focus on with our legislative priorities, what members care about, what issues matter most to them. We also, during the regular session of the General Assembly, there are weekly meetings that President Morgan hosts with Joe Fleming, Grace Akan, and others throughout the organization. It's an open meeting to basically keep up with what's going on with the legislative session. And I bring that up now because it's very important to keep up with what's going on in the session, so we can know what we want to lobby for or against in the following session, right? So that informs our creation process for the legislative priorities. And then the GAE Legislative Committee has meetings periodically, and it's during those meetings that we collaboratively come up with a draft proposal for the following year's legislative priorities. And as Karen mentioned, I'm gonna try to get rid of this thing over here. Sorry. So it's not letting me do it. Let's see. This is what the legislative priorities look like. And we've been working on this, building this for many years. And what we'll do is we'll go through and edit, right? We'll go through and review each section and, try to improve upon what we have. If there's something that we've accomplished already that doesn't need to be lobbied for necessarily anymore, or maybe like our position, the politics have changed in our state on some issue, or we'll edit that. Also, we'll make additions. For example, one of the additions we had this year was to establish a needs-based Hope Scholarship. To basically the current program is pretty regressive and isn't necessarily benefiting the people who need the most help in our state. So that's what we do in the meetings. And so members in the committee put forth their ideas and proposals. There's a collaborative generative dialogue and process during the meeting. And then once we have the meeting, once we have our draft finalized, we submit our proposal to the GAE Board of Directors. And if when they give us the go ahead, that'll be submitted to the representative assembly, the members that represent their constituents throughout our state. Prior to the representative assembly, we have people can submit online submissions for requests for changes to the draft, or we also have open hearings. We've done those virtually before the session. We do them in person at the session. So the hearings are people can come and discuss and the draft of the legislative priorities for the next session, and we can make edits, or we can generate ideas for members to produce. If they want to produce something to be submitted on the floor of the representative assembly, they can. Once we're in session in the representative assembly, this last step here, there's discussion, maybe debate, there's voting on addition or removal of various pieces, and then the membership votes, and the legislative priorities for the following year are determined at that meeting, and they're selected and adopted. So having said that, I know I just said a whole lot, but if there are any questions, I can open it up now.
Anybody have any questions? Jesse, I think you did a great job of again illustrating from top to or bottom to top. This is all member driven.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very democratic approach. It's a very grassroots, bottom up approach. And that's one of the reasons I'm very glad to be a member of GAE.
Well, thank you, Jesse, so much for sharing today. I appreciate it. And
My pleasure.
Lisa, the next thing to talk about on our agenda is the legislative contact team, which also goes through and involves members. So if you will share a little bit about that.
I will be happy to share about that, because that's one of the things I want to share with everyone that is in this meeting is because you are here, you will be invited to join the legislative contact team. And the vision for our legislative contact team is that we have members who live throughout the state, and we want our state legislators to have a member that they know this person is an educator, this person is a member of GAE, and as a state legislator, this is my go-to person. At the Capitol, everybody knows who Lisa is there. Everybody knows Joe, but I want our legislators to have that person back home. And this is something that GAE has had in the past that was very successful, so that our legislators can know. I'll give you the example. He's not on here yet, but Daniel and I have the same state representative. Representative Kendrick, if anything about education comes up, she is going to pick up her phone and send a text to Daniel and say, Daniel, what does GAE think about this? If she doesn't already know. And I want every legislator to have that person, so that they have someone that they know you live in their district, you are an educator, and that they can contact you. Now, that's not saying that you as a member of the legislative contact team are going to have to do all the research. We're going to give you the information. We're going to say to you, please join in this Zoom, and in the Zoom, we will have everything set up so you can send the email, introduce yourself. When an issue comes up that a legislator may ask you about, we are going to send you the information. We are going to give you the talking points. We are going to give you what you need to know about the issue, so you have it. And that's another one of the things. Karen, if you don't mind, can you make me a
You are.
okay, thank you. You knew what I was trying to say. I want to share with you all what we did for the Senate meeting on the retirement, just so you can see what we put together. And our plan is, when we have issues this year, we will have something like this that you can see. Quick GAE logo. What are we talking about? What's the issue? 3 to 4 bullet points saying this is what we're working with. And then what's our GAE position? What's our recommendation? So we will have these for the members of the legislative contact team on our big issues next Thursday. But when things pop up, we're going to have this for you. So you won't have to be like, well, I don't know. You will have the information in front of you if you are on the legislative contact team. And Linda, did you have a question?
Yes, Madam President, I'd like to ask respectfully if you would give maybe 15, 20 seconds on how that document impacted our activism in Columbus.
Yes, ma'am. So it was first, obviously, I'm going to say this. When we were in Columbus and Linda's talking, the Senate Retirement Subcommittee that was studying the public school employment retirement system met on Saturday, December 17th at 10 a.m. in Columbus. So we know they met on a Saturday, but there were about, I would say, 30 people in the room, and at least 2/3 of the people in the room were there with GAE. So by having this document, we were all able to stay on the same page. They heard the same message. Everyone told their story, their personal story, but then they were able to say, this is what we're asking for. And in fact, our members, it was obvious that they knew the issue. We had someone who was not there, was not our member, asking questions about what the hearing was about, that had received misinformation simply because they were just there and were not connected to our organization. So it helped us, it helped the legislators that were there, and it also helped the other people who attended the meeting, because we gave them to everyone. It helped them see GAE has the information on this, and we are not going in uninformed.
Thank you, Lisa, for all of that, and thank you, Linda, for the question. And I'm going to move us on, if that's okay, to actually going through and reviewing some basics of the Georgia General Assembly. And just very quickly, we know the Capitol, hopefully most of you have been there, is in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm going to talk a little bit about around the Capitol. And I'm going to start talking about the Twin Towers and the Floyd Room, which you can see in relation. And of course, when you go down to the General Assembly, MapQuest will help you find all of this. But the Sloppy Floyd building is also known as the Twin Towers. And I bring that up because when we have GAE Day at the Capitol, that's where we'll be meeting on February 23rd in the Empire Room on the 20th floor. And there are a ton of offices located in the Twin Towers, as you can see. Probably the one that impacts our active employees the most is the Professional Standards Commission. And I do share right next to the Twin Towers is a really nice parking deck, because some of us will be driving when we go down there, going through and going downtown to this area by MARTA. If you're in the Atlanta area, is also an option. I put on this map too the Paul Coverdale Legislative Office Building, which is across from the Capitol, because that is where a lot of the hearings will be held that happen before, after, during the General Assembly is in session. And you'll notice too, this is just copied from the General Assembly website this past week, that the General Assembly has also gone to hybrid meetings. So sometimes you can, rather than driving into Atlanta, you can go through and watch the hearing online, but you won't be able to speak during the if you're not there in person. So there will be, sometimes we'll be asking people, I hope, to come to Atlanta to go through and actually participate and speak at the hearings. And there is a nice little parking deck, pretty small, right across from the Capitol. So let's talk about the Capitol itself briefly. Which one of these is false? You can enter through any door on any floor. You must have a photo ID if you are age 18 or older. Once inside, you will go through a metal detector, and no weapons, including pocket knives, are allowed. So put your answer in the chat, just by number. Yes, people have gotten it. You can't enter through any door on any floor. There are only doors on the ground level, and you'll want to enter the entrance that's across from the Paul Coverdale building. That's the entrance that people who are not who are visiting will go through. We have one more audience participation, and this one is, which one is true? The Capitol has 5 floors. The governor's office is on the 5th floor. The House and the Senate are on the same floor, and restrooms can be found on every floor. So which one is true? If you'll put the number in the chat. Exactly. The House and the Senate are on the same floor. The governor's office is on the 1st floor, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State on the 2nd floor. You'll come in on the 1st floor, you'll take the elevator usually up to the 3rd floor. This is where the Senate, which is pictured here, and then the larger House meet, and then the gallery is up on the 4th floor. there is, I know of a restroom that's on the stairs between the third and the fourth floor. The restrooms are in short supply, in my humble opinion. So locating these crucial points of interaction are important when you actually get into the Capitol. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to show just a short video that just reviews the entire legislative process for the Georgia General Assembly. And this is put out by the PBS, and they do a good job. So let me just switch screens, and hopefully we are on play video. And it's about a 5-minute video.
On the second Monday of every year, the Georgia General Assembly convenes for a 40-day session. The General Assembly is our state's legislative body. Located in the capital of Atlanta, it's where state laws are written, debated, and amended. The legislature consists of two chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Much of the work in the General Assembly concerns bills. A bill is a draft of a proposed law. It's presented to a legislative body for approval. There are two types of bills, general and local. A general bill applies statewide. A local bill concerns a law at the city or county level. All bills are written to amend the official code of Georgia annotated. This is a compendium of laws for Georgia. In order for a bill to become a law, it has to pass through many stages. First, it's filed with the clerk of the House or the Secretary of the Senate. In Georgia, only legislatures in the House and Senate can introduce bills. However, any bill to raise or spend money must originate in the House. The presiding officers of each chamber take the next step. In the House, the presiding officer is called the Speaker of the House. The presiding officer of the Senate is the state lieutenant governor. After a bill is introduced, the Speaker or lieutenant governor assigns the bill to a standing committee. Standing committees are the heart of the legislative process. A standing committee is a small group of legislators that reviews and considers bills for approval. A standing committee gathers and studies the facts related to a bill. Testimony is heard from experts on the subject. Legislatures who favor or oppose the bill are called to speak. Citizens have a chance to comment on the bill as well. Unlike the General Assembly, which meets once a year for 40 days, standing committees may meet year-round. The committees cover a range of subjects like transportation, education, energy, and agriculture. A standing committee decides the next step for a bill. They have several options. They can report the bill back to the House favorably, with or without amendments. They can report out a substitute bill. They can report the bill with a do not pass recommendation, or they can hold the bill from consideration. Once a bill has come out of a committee, it's put on the Rules Calendar. Prepared by the Rules Committee every evening during the legislative session, the Rules Calendar determines what bills will be introduced and when. Presiding officers now present the bills to the chamber. The bills are called up one by one, and debate takes place. Legislative members may come forward to speak at the well, a podium at the head of the chamber, or legislators may ask questions from their desk. After debate, a vote is held. Legislators vote yea or nay through an electronic voting system. A majority of votes is required for passage of the bill. In the smaller 56-member Senate, that's 29 votes. The larger 180-member House requires 91 votes for a bill to pass. Identical bills must pass the House of Representatives and the Senate to become law. A passed bill is sent from one house to another. If the bill is amended by the second house, it is sent back to the House where it originated. That House can accept or refuse the bill. If the bill is refused, it's sent back to the other chamber, and the House that added amendments can remove them or stand firm. If the two houses cannot agree on the particulars of a bill, it moves to the conference committee, which consists of 3 members of each house. The conference committee tries to forge a compromise acceptable to both houses, and then writes a report which is presented to the Senate and the House of Representatives. The last stage of the legislative process involves the executive branch of state government, the governor's office. In general, the governor receives most bills at the end of the legislative session, at which time the governor has 40 days to act on the bill. The governor has 3 options: sign the bill into law, veto the bill, or do nothing. If the bill is vetoed, it is sent back to the House where it was introduced. The bill may or may not then overcome the veto. 2/3 of both houses must vote for the bill to override the veto. If the governor does nothing with the bill, it becomes law after the 40-day period has expired.
Karen, we can't hear you.
Well, then I will repeat that. I think thank you so much. It's a great little overview of what goes on during the General Assembly, because most of us don't live this on a day in, day out kind of basis. So I always learn something new when I watch that video. And we're moving along to the part where hopefully you are going through and thinking, okay, I can lobby. This is something that I can do. And how do I interact with those legislators? Well, whose job is lobbying? I hate to tell you, it is yours. And you're probably thinking, why me? And this is the little story about everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. And there's an important job to be done, and everybody was asked to do it. Lisa's asked everybody. Everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Everybody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. So all of that to say, we are all hopeful that by the end of Lobby and Learn, if you are not part of the legislative contact team, if you haven't been contacting your legislators, that now is the time to make that New Year's resolution to do that. And it's important that you know who your legislators are. And one of the easiest places, if you don't already, I'm sure everybody has everybody on, or nobody or anybody on speed dial. And if you go to my voter page at the Secretary of State's office, you can do a lot of things on my voter page. Those are boxed in on the left. And then to get into my voter page, it just requires 4 steps on the right. And if you are me, you will then go through and see what congressional district you're in, what county school board district you're in, state senate, state house, etc. And you can click on each one of those live links to find out more about who your elected representative is. And you can also go to the Georgia General Assembly website and click on for both the House and the Senate. And again, if you live with me or if you're in the Athens area, as Jesse Evans and I are, Houston Gaines is one of our representatives, or is our elected representative for at least part of Athens. And you'll notice here that who the staff member is. As I will mention later on, kind of when you are part of education, you don't want to tick off the school secretary or the bus driver or the custodian. Well, it's the same thing with the staff of your elected official. You want to keep that person on your good side. Also, you can go through and you can see information about your elected official on the General Assembly website, including committee sponsored legislation and any press that's available that has been put out by your elected official. And who am I to lobby? And I like this quote from Marianne Williamson about who are you not to lobby? Our deepest fear is that we are inadequate. Sorry, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? And as GAE members, it's kind of together we stand, united we stand, together we fall. And so it's really important that we go through and be active, know who our elected officials are, and know how to lobby them. So in terms of lobbying, 5 C's. Hopefully we can all remember 5 C's when we are lobbying, whether it's in person or whether it is virtually or whether it's by email. We live in the South. We need to be courteous, and we need to be especially courteous, as I mentioned, to the staff people connected with your elected official. We need to tell our story. You have elected this person. You have your story, your truth. As Lisa mentioned at the hearing for PSERS down in Columbus, people were telling their stories. Nobody can argue with your story. Nobody can go through and say, well, that's not your truth. That isn't happening for you. So tell what is going on for you. You need to be correct. You can't make up information when you're telling your story. Do you have to know everything? No, you don't have to know everything. And you can say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. Could I get you that information? And then fill in your timeline and how you're going to get that information to the legislator. And make sure, obviously, that you follow up and you do provide any information that's been requested. You need to be concise. Those of us who have been at the Capitol literally working the ropes, if you have 2 minutes to spend with a legislator during session when they're on the floor voting, that is a gracious plenty. So being long-winded usually doesn't work with this. You need to get to the point, and you need to ask for the close. That's always the hardest one for me. Representative Gaines, can I count on you to vote for this particular piece of legislation? Because you need to know where your legislator stands. And if the legislator isn't going to move, then move on to someone who is on the fence, and you might be able to go through and to sway that person. If somebody's firmly entrenched, you're probably not going to move them, and you need to move on and speak with someone who you can help influence. And just fine tuning, talking to your legislators, your elected officials. 5 things here. Thank them. We know that being an elected official, yes, they put themselves up for public office, but people like to be thanked for what they're doing. Don't necessarily have to agree with everything that the elected official is doing, but you can go through and thank them for their service. The next step is make sure you introduce yourself. Even though I've met Houston Gaines numerous times, he's met other people numerous times. So remind gently who you are and whom do you represent. You represent the 1.8 million children in Georgia. You represent the members of GAE, whoever it is that you're taking with you, figuratively to this meeting. State your position on the piece of legislation and then ask again what their position is. So 5 C's of lobbying, fine tuning when you're talking to your legislator. And in terms again of whom do you represent? 3 organizations, the local, the state, and the national. So we're going to go through and figure out on the next part of our time together, what the heck do you talk about? And I'd like to invite Joe Fleming to go through and share with us General Assembly 2023. Joe, what the heck is going on?
It's a great question, Karen. If you could give me permission to share just briefly,
I can.
we'll talk a little bit about that. As has been mentioned, the session starts Monday. The House has announced that they're going to go in at 9:30 in the morning. Senate will probably go in at the same time or 10 o'clock. On Monday, that's also the date of the national championship game, which features the Georgia Bulldogs. They have announced that they will convene. They will swear in their new members, or all the members, and then they will adjourn for the day on Monday. So it will be a short day for the General Assembly on Monday. On Tuesday, I'm not sure if they're going to be in session technically, but there won't be much happening there. I suspect they won't even meet, but if they do, they'll be in and out within 30 minutes. Wednesday's up in the air. I'm not sure if they're going to convene that day, but Thursday is the swearing in of the governor. So the first week's got a few things going on. I don't expect any legislation to really move. But the next week, the week of Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, is traditionally a week when the legislature is not technically in session, but the budget committees of each chamber meet to discuss the budget that the governor has presented to them. The governor is required to submit to the General Assembly a budget from which they work from within 5 days of the start of the session. One thing unusual this year, usually the governor's State of the State address would take place on a Thursday of the first week. That's been delayed until I believe Wednesday. If the Wednesday's the 25th, that's when we'll be looking at that. So we may be off to a slow start, but we've got a lot going on in terms of changes in the General Assembly this year. I don't recall the last time that in 1 year we had a new speaker and a new lieutenant governor. It's been a while. You may remember that Lieutenant Governor David Ralston passed away shortly after the election. The Republicans have already nominated their candidate for Speaker of the House, who is the top officer in the House. They've nominated Rep. John Burns from around Effingham and Screven County down in East Georgia. It's almost a certainty that he will be elected since Republicans control the majority of the House of Representatives. I don't think we're going to see a situation like we did just in the last several days in Washington, D.C. I think that'll be decided on the first ballot pretty easily. Under Georgia's Constitution, the lieutenant governor, and the new lieutenant governor is former State Senator Burt Jones. He also, in addition to being a lieutenant governor, serves as the top officer of the state Senate, the president of the Senate. So we'll have new leadership to work with, not only just in the top position, but in things such as the majority whip and caucus chairman, things of that nature. There also are likely to be, with the changes in the General Assembly and the changes in leadership, new committee chairman. We already know that the Senate Retirement Committee Chairman, Randy Robertson, from down around the Columbus, Georgia area, he will not be returning as retirement chairman. He's been elected to the Senate leadership. I don't have any idea on who the new retirement chairman will be, but obviously once we know that's somebody that we will be meeting with, and we will want GAE retired members to be with us when we meet that person. There's a possibility that we could have a new Senate Education Chairman. There's a possibility we could have a new House Retirement Chairman or a new House Education Committee Chairman. I've always thought that the chairman of the House Education Committee would prefer a committee that he considers more sexy. Usually those are committees that spend money, but we'll see. We knew going into the election, for example, though, that half of the members of the House Education Committee would not be returning to the General Assembly. They were either running for another office or they retired. So we have a lot of new faces to meet on the education committees and the retirement committees as well. Another important committee to GAE is the Appropriations Committee. This is the committee that takes the budget submitted by the governor, makes changes to it, adds to it, maybe takes things out sometimes. That chairman has been Terry England in the House. He retired and is not returning to the House of Representatives. Jan Jones, who's the interim speaker, has already announced that Matt Hatchett is the new Appropriations Committee chairman. That committee is hugely important because it determines how the state spends its money, and it directly determines how much funding is available for public education. Dr. Stephen Owens, who is on after me and is a tremendous resource on budget and policy issues pertaining to education, will tell you that there's only been 3 times in the last 20 years that QBE has been fully funded. 17 times they've cut public education. And if I recall, Stephen will correct me, but there's about $11 billion in cuts that we'll never see restored that were made to public education in the last 2 decades. So the Appropriations Committee is very important to what we do at the state capitol. Illustrating further the changes, there are 10 new faces in the Senate, 10 senators who will be seated for the first time. Democrats picked up 1 seat in the state Senate. In the House, Democrats picked up 2 seats in the House. There are 43 new faces in a body of 180 representatives. So again, Lisa and I and you guys that come down and visit us, we've got a lot of new faces to get to know. We're fortunate that we were very engaged in the legislative campaigns and know many of these representatives and senators already because we supported their campaigns. We had a great winning percentage among our legislative candidates. So we'll be looking forward to meeting those that we already know, helping them through their orientation and being their resource on education issues and meeting the new faces. And even as we have those 53 new members in the General Assembly, we still have 4 seats that are undecided. I mentioned David Ralston passing away. There's a special election ongoing for his seat up around Blue Ridge, Georgia. The special election was held on January 3rd, but none of the candidates received a majority of the vote. So on January 31st, there'll be a runoff for that seat. On January 31st, there'll also be a runoff in Southwest Georgia. One of the state senators from down there has accepted an offer to lead one of the state agencies. So that creates a vacancy. A state representative in that Senate district has also announced he's running for the Senate seat. So we have 2 vacancies down there. The Senate district runs roughly from Moultrie to Bainbridge and parts of Thomas County, for example. The House district's more around Moultrie. I think it includes part of Tift County as well. Then we have a situation over in Winder Barrow where there was an open seat An election was held in November. Someone was elected, but they've been charged with stealing prescriptions from a nursing home, and that person is elected not to be seated. So there's a special election there. So we yet still have 4 more races coming up. I'm just going to scan through quickly because Stephen and Lisa will go over the budget, go over the policy details of what's coming up. But real quickly, budget, as I mentioned, is always an important issue. It's going to seem like this session, they're going to think they're rich. They got approximately a $6.6 billion surplus, so they'll feel like they have money to spend. But a lot of that is COVID money still in the system. The governor's talking about $1 billion tax cut. The governor's talking about $1 billion in tax rebates. The concern with that situation is when the COVID money goes away and when there are leaner times, we know historically where they cut. They cut from public education. So a lot of eyes will be on that. I've heard from the governor's office, they're going to have some money for additional counselors. I consider it a small amount, 25 million. They're going to have some additional money for paraprofessionals. And they're going to have about 25 million also for what they call learning loss. Lisa can talk about how much she doesn't like the term learning loss. There was also a study committee on education funding going on. One of GBPI and Stephen's priorities has been bringing attention to the fact that Georgia does not provide additional money for school districts with a large number of students living in poverty. That was the topic of many of the summer study and fall study committee meetings on education funding, and a bill's already been introduced, pre-filed, as they say. You can file legislation before the session actually starts. But Sandra Scott is back with a bill to address that. We're still pushing additional pay raises for educators, both teachers and ESPs. And we've been focused this summer on PSERS retirement benefits for our ESP members. Vouchers, you might as well expect vouchers to be back every year. What we saw last year for the first time, however, in Georgia is what I would call a universal voucher, a voucher that any student in Georgia could take advantage of, taxpayer funded private school tuitions. The voucher programs in Georgia now generally around students who have medical disabilities or learning disabilities. This would open it up at a terrific cost to any kid in the state of Georgia. Teachers evaluation systems, there was a great bill last year from John Corbett that would have taken the needs development rating and made it constructive rather than punitive. Right now, a new teacher, any teacher who receives 2 needs development ratings within 5 years can lose their teacher certification. TRS, I think it's going to be the focus, and Debbie Simons, I noticed, is on the call. She might add some comments on this, but the market's been tough on everybody lately, and it's been tough on investments for TRS as well. There'll be a larger than usual appropriation for that. That will create alarm in some legislators' minds, and there are some legislators whose goal is to ultimately eliminate the costs to the state by privatizing TRS. We've got to be on guard for that. The last thing I'll mention is a high priority for GAE, and that's the elimination of waivers. Hopefully by now, many of you have heard us talk about this. There is a situation in Georgia where school districts have the power to ignore any state law on public education. Literally, a bill can pass the General Assembly, it can be signed into law by the governor, but a school district essentially just has to notify the Board of Education that they don't wish to follow that law. One example, an easy example for people to understand, is class sizes. We have laws in the books that dictate how many students, the maximum number of students that can be in each classroom. Again, the school district basically tells the Department of Education, we don't want to follow that. Department of Education nods their head, and suddenly there are literally no limits on the number of students in that classroom. And we're seeing the explosion of the number of kids in classes. We see waivers also for gifted and special education classes. A lot of those are being used so they don't have to hire more teachers and they can cram more kids into the classroom. It serves our students poorly. and it creates a terrific hardship on educators. So got a lot of new faces to meet. Excited about the opportunity, excited about another session with GAE. And I'll turn it over to the expert, Stephen Owen, for more details. Stephen, back to you in the booth.
Thanks so much. And thank y'all for having me this morning. I'm going to go over some of the same things that Joe did, but as he said, just in a little bit more detail. To give y'all a quick introduction, my name is Dr. Stephen Owens, and I am the Education Director at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. Let me share my screen so we are all quite literally on the same page. If you want to know a little bit more about GBPI, we have a mission to advance lasting solutions that expand economic opportunity and well-being for all Georgians, with a vision for the state that's fair and inclusive, where all people prosper. We strive to be anti-racist in that work. We're going to jump in immediately and just see where the state budget sits in Georgia for fiscal year 23, which is what we're in right now. The fiscal year goes kind of like school years does, in that it starts over the summer and then ends over the summer as well. So we're in the second half of fiscal year 23 now. K-12 education funding is 35.4% of the state budget. That's the plurality of the state budget. That is not rare nationwide. It says in our state constitution that public education should be a primary obligation of the government. And so that's reflected in the budget, that it is the largest single line item of the budget. What that looks like is $10.7 billion sent to the Department of Education. Vast majority of that is going directly to local education agencies via school boards and individual charters. And then the vast majority of that is going directly into the classroom. 70 cents of every single dollar spent in education is being spent directly in the classroom in the state of Georgia. One thing that I've noticed from previous years that has caught my eye is this thing called the Equalization Grant. Now, Quality Basic Education Act funds most of what is going into public education in Georgia. And sitting on top of that are these grants. And one of them is the equalization, and it's meant to treat low wealth property school districts somewhat similar to high wealth property school districts. As y'all know, schools are funded via state and local funding. So the state can send everyone the same amount of money, but that doesn't make things fair. If Clayton County can only raise, $500 from taxes, and Fayette County right next door can raise $1,500 per student in local taxes. And so what the state does is has this grant which treats every single district in the lower half of the state as far as property wealth as if they're that average. And if you want to know kind of who's sitting right at the average, it's Gwinnett, which you might think is a super rich district. It is, except it also has 1 out of every 10 students in the entire state of Georgia. And so Gwinnett is right there around the state average. And if your low wealth school district raises local property taxes, they get those local property taxes, and then the state of Georgia sets more money on top of that to treat it as if they have the tax base of your average district in Georgia. And that's the equalization grant. That's one of the reasons we have one of the fairer funding systems in the United States. It doesn't make it fair. It just means fairer than a lot of our state neighbors. And this is the first time I've seen it lowered where it hasn't been lowered by a budget cut. So it dipped $164 million this past year. And I want to give you 2 possible explanations for why. The first is that our lower wealth school districts, think Southwest Georgia, rural schools, as well as districts with a lot of students living in poverty, like your Clayton counties of the world, maybe their property taxes have grown faster than the rest of the state. Maybe we're starting to see a little bit of a leveling off, a catching up between our lower wealth districts and our higher wealth districts. That's the optimistic view. The pessimistic view was given to me by a Republican lawmaker who said that this is a result of the fact that the state keeps giving local property tax breaks away. So if you build a Rivian plant in your district it looks like you're insane, like you have very wealthy property now. But if that plant doesn't have to pay a dime to local property taxes, then the state doesn't have to send as much money in equalization grants, and the school is getting less money, not only because they don't get those equalization grants, but also they're not getting that property tax because that land has kind of been given away from state tax breaks. And so I do not know which of those is the answer, but I will say we are going to author a report at the end of this year where we look at that exact question. What's the relationship between state giving tax breaks away to corporations and local schools having the funding they need? And I think we're starting to see that in our equalization grant. As Joe mentioned, we have $6.6 billion in unobligated surplus. That is sitting on top of how much the state needs to operate is the rainy day fund, or revenue shortfall reserve fund, which is basically just the emergency funds for the state of Georgia in case of a recession. That is completely filled. And then on top of that is the unobligated surplus of $6.6 billion. Some of this is spoken for by the fact that we've had a gas tax holiday for the past several months that the governor intends to fill back in with these dollars. He has said that he wants to spend some on a tax break. We'll see how much of this goes to one-time expenditures versus pairing this maybe with revenue so that we can increase the services that every Georgian enjoys. Okay, so that's where we are, but how does this compare to other states in the union? There are kind of three ways that most education finance experts use to study school funding. And it's equity, which is how fair are things? Are the schools in, as I mentioned, Clayton County getting enough compared to the schools in Fayette County? Because Clayton County might have more need based on the fact that they have more students learning English, more students living in poverty. So kind of how fair are things? Next is adequacy. You could have the fairest funding system in the world if you gave every single school $1, right? That's completely fair and equal, but that's not enough. So how adequate is the funding we have? And then finally, within schools, is it adequate and equitable within the schools? Because we sometimes treat that school as just like that is the stand-in for how students are receiving these funds. But within schools, are the kids getting what they need? And so first, equity. If you look at national rankings, Georgia, as I mentioned, does have one of the fairer funding systems, but it's like being the strongest 8-year-old. Like, that's great. But when I wrestle with my 8-year-old son, I am just absolutely dominating, and I'm out of shape 38-year-old. So yes, we do send $800 more per student to high poverty schools compared to low poverty schools, but it used to be a much fairer system. Georgia used to be in the top 10 of how fair our funding systems was. Now we are 16th, which is still good. It puts us in that top third of states. But you can see that slipping year to year. The real area where we see a ton of need, is the fact that no schools in Georgia have enough. That's that adequacy figure. We are $1,800 below the national average, which puts us in the bottom third of states nationwide of just do we have enough? And I think we're a little too used to it. We're too used to the idea that a lot of our schools still don't have arts and music programs. We're too used to how high our class sizes are and how low our teachers are paid, which is just a huge driver of funding in schools. And so that's an obvious need that we have. And then finally, what's our support for specifically low-income students in the state? Because that is kind of where my eye goes to how well are we educating our children, is our low-income students, how are they doing? That if you don't support them outside the school, similar to all the things y'all deal with, if you don't support them outside the school, then we have to support them within. And that's good. That is a value of public education, that it continues to be this pillar in the community I think we need to stop pretending like that's not true, though. We need to stop pretending like schools aren't a significant source of welfare for the community when we talk about health, transportation, and not only to include skills acquisition. And so how do we treat our low income students outside the school? I want to give just kind of a quick rundown so you have a sense of why GBPI, my organization, the organizations that we partner with, are so bullish on the need for an opportunity weight for students living in poverty. One, Georgia has the highest number of cities that rely on abusive fines and fees as a way to pay for their criminal legal systems. What does that mean? It means when you're driving down to Savannah and you hit that speed trap on I-16, that $300 ticket hurts someone making middle income wages. Maybe it's not something you worry about if you're a richer Georgian, but if you're a low income Georgian, $300 could be the difference between you buying groceries that month or you paying rent. When we base our criminal legal system on these kind of flat fines and fees, things can snowball where if you can't pay that fine, maybe now your license is suspended. If your license is suspended and you still have to drive because you got to go to work, maybe now you're spending some time in jail if you get pulled over. You can see how it snowballs to really trap low-income folks into this cycle. We haven't expanded Medicaid. We're one of only 14 states now that haven't expanded Medicaid, which is the federal government waiting to give us billions of dollars so that we can give more Georgians health insurance. Georgia has not done that. We have really strict cash assistance, which is the easiest way to support people living in poverty, is cash assistance. If you live in rural Georgia, you have barely to no childcare supports. That it doesn't matter if you can get a coupon to save money on childcare if a childcare center is not close to your house. And so that hurts low income folks more than their middle and high income neighbors. And then finally, neglect is the top reason the Child Protective Services is called. I bring that up because there's a direct line between neglect and how much money you have. I grew up with a single mom and two older brothers. Sometimes there was nothing else she could do. Mom just had to leave us at home by ourselves, even if we were really young. And if for one reason or another, the police came to our house, that's a very good reason to take kids away from their parents, is seeing that there's no adult around at that time. I bring all this up because if we're not going to support these kids and these communities outside the school, then it has to be addressed within it. That is the reality of schooling in the United States. And there's a direct line to how we treat low-income folks to the history of white supremacist policies in the state of Georgia. There's a connection between wealth and race in Georgia on average because of racist policies. So if we can have a good, strong education policy that supports low-income folks, it can be a tool for racial justice. To that end, Georgia is one of only 6 states in the entire nation that has no funding specifically to educate students living in poverty. If you look at how we fund schools, the largest bucket is called direct instructional costs. And this pays, the only question it really needs to answer is how many teachers are needed. That if you're a general education high school student, you are guaranteed the fewest state dollars because the people who wrote QBE said that the easiest group of students to educate, they can be in the largest class sizes. Whether or not that's still true in the year of our Lord 2023, we don't know, because we haven't had like a good strong study in Georgia of like actually what it costs to educate students to the Georgia standards of excellence. But compare that to kindergarten, which they say, okay, kindergartners need a smaller class size. And I don't disagree. They need a smaller class size. And so you're going to get more money as an individual kindergartner than you are as a 9th grade student. And it's this recognition that like different needs require different dollar amounts, that if students with disabilities need smaller class sizes, need accommodation. So there's more money for students with disabilities. I think we all understand that intuitively, that we need to have smaller class sizes for students with unique needs so that we can educate everyone up to a standard. But then why haven't we recognized one of the largest challenges that I keep hearing from school folks, which is the fact that we have two kids entering the schoolhouse, one whose parents make $120,000 a year, the other whose parents make $30,000 a year. And we're expected for both of those kids to do the exact same on the state tests, to graduate at the same rate. And we should expect that. But if we want something, we've got to pay for it. That is the world we live in. And if we don't command state dollars to recognize this need, it's almost like we're intuitively saying then those kids just should not do as well as their richer neighbors. This is another area. This is a windmill that GBPI is going to continue to tilt at. I want to explain this chart just real quick. Those gold bars at the bottom, that's the amount of money coming from the state to schools to bus kids to and from school. So that pays for buses, bus drivers, bus monitors, right? You can see that line has gone practically unchanged from the year 2000 through 2022. But that does not recognize the reality that it costs more to bus kids in 2022 than it did in 2000 for several reasons. We gained 250,000 students over this time. Buses cost more, labor costs more, gas costs much more, and it's just we have demands that are higher in our schools where people want high-speed cameras. They want to have a microphone. You might want to have seat belts or anti-lock brakes. So while the cost has gone up, if the state funding has remained the same, it puts the burden on school districts because it's a law. You have to provide school buses and you have to provide transportation to and from the school, which is, again, a good thing. But in 1991, the state paid 54% of all the costs to bus kids to and from school. And in 2022, it was 20%. That's money that the local school districts just have to find somewhere. So over this time from 2000 to 2022, this has been an additional $677 million that Georgia local schools have had to find to make up the difference. And you can see that huge jump from 2021 to 2022. 2021 was when we still had some school closures. And so we had just fewer buses on the road. 2022, not only did every single school open this past school year, but also we've seen this huge inflationary hit on our bus driving, where we spent $1.14 billion in school transportation. And if you're wondering, okay, where does that money come from? It comes from the classroom, because I mentioned before, 70 cents of every dollar goes directly into the classroom. So if you need to find money, that means taking it from the classroom. That means denying teachers a cost of living raise. That means larger class sizes. That means fewer materials inside the classroom. That means less money for parapros. So this is exactly what we're seeing, is that you have to rob from Peter to pay Paul, and we're hoping to see some significant movement on that this session. Another area that Joe just talked about that I don't want to spend too much time on, state of Georgia pays for one school counselor to every 450 kids. That is an insane caseload. And we don't even, that's the aspirational. We don't even provide enough funding for one for every 450 because there's certain student groups that don't command any funding for counselors. And so that $20 odd million that the governor wants to put into school counselors should get us to that one every 450 ratio. The American School Counselors Association says that we need about one school counselor for every 250 kids. We know that the kids are not all right now. We know that the pandemic has decimated families, has made kids reevaluate how seriously they want to take their relationship to homework, to schooling, to other responsibilities. And like, these are things I've heard from teachers and school folks. With local funding, we pay for about one school counselor every 419 kids. That puts us behind Alabama and South Carolina, our neighbors, and how much money they're putting towards school counselor funding. We need to support our teachers, our communities, by recognizing the role that school counselors play in interventions in kids' lives, so that we don't just wait for things to go terribly wrong to speak into kids' lives. And I think that school counselors, the evidence shows that they're very gifted at that, and that we see an incredible return on investment when we invest in school counselors. Now, vouchers, as Joe mentioned, these are things that are going to come back every year, much to my chagrin. GBPI has a long-standing opposition to public funds going to private schools. Since 2008, when the first voucher was created in Georgia, state of Georgia has funneled $1.3 billion to private schools through 2 vouchers now. Over that same time, the state cut $8.2 billion. Don't let anybody tell you that we can fund 2 systems at the same time, public schools and private schools, because your state was sending $80 million to private schools the year when we were cutting over $1 billion to our public schools per year. This grows every single year, even though there have been state audits that have shown that these are ripe for abuse and fraud. We have evidence from other states of the misuse of these funds, even when they're used correctly to go to a private school. There have been these incredible studies that have shown in Ohio and Louisiana, their statewide vouchers are worse on student test scores. The kids who take those tests, those vouchers and go to private schools, they take a larger academic hit than the one we measured from Hurricane Katrina and from school closures in COVID-19, or building closures in COVID-19. Y'all, the grief that I've heard my education partners take for adapting in a pandemic. Why are we investing in a policy that is shown to hurt students' test scores even worse than the worst hit during COVID-19 to test scores? Even all that being said, we're talking about putting funds towards schools that regularly kick kids out for being gay, because of their gender orientation, because of their religion, because of their disability, or the fact that they might speak a language other than English in the home. This is one of many reasons GPI will continue to push for not less government support via private school vouchers. This kind of like radical expansion of the way that we view education funding, but rather when we talk about how to support specifically students with disabilities, what does it look like to expand that? Let's give more rights, because this is the only policy that I know where the state will say, if a kid is struggling in its local public school, where the state appears to say, we can give you a chance at a better education at private school. It's just a chance. There's no guarantee, but you have to trade us your rights. Give us some of your rights away. And I think all the evidence of how much we need those protections, specifically for students with disabilities, how there's no evidence that kids will do better academically once they go to that private school. We need to take a hard look at if we want to continue to fund this kind of separate, discriminatory system of education. I think y'all have already heard a little bit about TRS, and so I don't want to belabor that or scoop anyone if that's coming down the pike. All I can say is that I was given a grant a few years ago to better understand pensions. Georgia is unique nationally in the fact that we always pay our bills when it comes to TRS. And that's even when you consider that it's a relatively generous benefit if you're a vested member, specifically in the Southeast. And it's one of the reasons that our pension is funded, at least the last report, at around 73%. This is one reason that other states are jealous of Georgia. It's one of the reasons that we have such a high bond rating, is because Georgia takes care of the teachers' retirement system. Lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, have always made sure to pay that amount. And I think one of the reasons that lawmakers are more likely to do that, besides, support for teachers, is that we do have really strong leadership at the TRS board, in my estimation. And one example of that is that our significantly lower investment expense, how much do you have to pay for TS dollars to be invested wisely? 0.06% is just minuscule. As Joe mentioned, if we move to a 401k and a private system, and we move from, and right now it's a defined benefit program. If it was moved to a defined contribution program, you are going to be paying a lot higher rate of an investment expense than 0.06%. National average for pensions is 0.44%. Average for 401ks is 1%. You're talking about doubling even the national average. And Georgia just has this tiny amount that we spend on that. And we've been getting really good returns compared to other pension systems. These are things that we're going to continue to watch. Can we get a good recommendation out of the Senate Resolution 650, that study committee Joe mentioned, for an opportunity rate for students living in poverty, mental health support, school counselor investment, a fulfillment of a 2013 law? Are there going to be those budget hawks who believe that we can, quote unquote, reform TRS? That'll be something that we'll continue to watch. Medicaid unwinding, I want to talk just briefly about this. Medicaid has grown significantly during the pandemic, or the enrollment in Medicaid has. And over that time, there's been this kind of public health emergency that said that everyone who's on can just stay on, that you don't have to kind of reapply or be redetermined. And that's been really good for folks on Medicaid. Starting in April of this year until April of next year, every single participant in Medicaid is going to be redetermined to make sure that folks still live where they live, are still making the income, are still have the need that they have. This could be devastating because people have moved to new houses. One of the main reasons people get kicked off Medicaid is not because they no longer apply or no longer have the reason to be on it and are qualified for it, but it's because they miss out on paperwork, or they didn't realize that, or if the website goes down. Georgia is not prepared to do this. We can plainly say, and we need our school partners across the state to make sure with their flyers that we can put out. I can give more resources to GAE afterwards if y'all have interest in partnering in this. This is something we're going to be watching very closely. 69% of every person on Medicaid is a child. If we see over the next year just tons of kids starting to lose Medicaid, you're going to feel it. And we either need to address it on the front end, or we're going to be addressing it on the back end, because as I mentioned, the school is asked to address myriad of society's ills, not least of which is just having health insurance in the first place and being able to afford basic care. And then vouchers, again, are always, I feel like Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill with vouchers again. Hopefully we can have a little bit of a reprieve this year. I'm going to stop sharing, and if y'all have any questions, I will do my best to respond.
Renee,
Hey,
did
Stephen,
you
thank
have your hand up and want to ask a question?
I think Dr. Glass wanted to go.
Hey, yeah,
Oh,
Renee.
oh,
Hi,
hey.
hi. Stephen, I am a retired school social worker, and I feel like we're one of the little long secrets. We are part of the counseling support. I worked for many years in schools. I keep hearing about school counselors, school psychologists. We have children who have returned from the pandemic, families who are still struggling financially, emotionally. Mental health issues are on the rampage from 3-year-olds on adulthood. Why are school social workers not looked at? Our ratio is one school social worker per 2,475 students. And that's not realistic, because many school social workers have 5 or more. Some school system districts don't even have school social workers. Some have one that serves the whole district. How can we work, you're saying you're an advocate, to promote the need for us to have more support staff in these schools? Because school social workers provide individual, group, we do home visits, we do counseling, we sometimes overlap with school counselors. although we all have specific roles such as school psychologists and school social workers, but we're indirectly funded.
I mean, the short answer is, first of all, you're 1,000% right. Let me not get twisted there. You're 1,000% right. The short answer is the state underfunds social programs and the safety net everywhere. That what you're seeing in the state's inability to support students through social workers inside the school, that's felt in DFACS. I think I read yesterday that DFACS is looking to hire 500 people right now, has 500 vacancies across the state. And so I do think that there's a lot of partners who kind of use school counselors as this catch-all, but when or that use school counselors to refer to just school counselor funding, you know, like that one role. When I'm talking about school counselors, I'm putting it under a broader kind of supports for the entire child. But to your point, I would love for maybe Dr. Renee, sorry. If you and I could talk offline, I would love to figure out a way that we could kind of expand people's knowledge of that. Maybe that looks like kind of co-authoring an op-ed, or GBPI could help you write an op-ed, or just like, what does it look like to provide testimony to lawmakers? Because you're right. I think that's something that people need to have a better sense of, and not really understanding the crisis that we're in for those children specifically. I think that yours is a great, but there is no good reason for the state not to have a larger investment in that, is the short answer.
I would love to. I will put my email in the chat, or I would love to talk more.
I will
off the
put,
record,
yes,
and
email
also
me.
connect you to the SWAG, our organization president, and our legislative committee, Stephen.
Absolutely. That would be great.
Thank you.
And Stephen, I know there are a couple other questions. What I would like to do is continue on with our agenda, and people with your hands up, Patty and Robin, if you could put your questions in the chat, I'm hopeful Stephen could answer them there. And when I send out the link to today's meeting, I'll include contact information for our presenters. And I've known Stephen to be nothing but forthcoming and very helpful in responding to any concerns that we have. So I'm hopeful that will work. Lisa, you are on to, and remember, Stephen's just the messenger, Joe's just the messenger, and Lisa's going to be the messenger talking about waivers. Lisa, are you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry,
Okay.
I was trying to share, and first before I got to what I needed to do. So I'm going to talk about the waivers and what they are and how we got here. So the school system waivers, and I'm gonna go out of order with this. Okay, show you the map first. This map shows the districts, and if the district is white, that means they are a strategic waiver school system. If they are yellow, they are a charter system. And the only two that are pink is Webster County and Beaufort City. So Webster County and Beaufort City are the only two districts in the state of Georgia that are required to comply and follow all state education law. And this is an issue. We were just talking about counselors and social workers. And here's where we are. And I keep telling everybody this: we can't fix any of our problems until we fix the waiver problem, because the legislature could tomorrow pass a bill that says we have to have one counselor for every 200 students. But if the school district is not Webster and not Beaufort City, if they're a charter system, they have a blanket waiver. If they are a strategic waiver system, all they have to do is modify their waiver requests and they don't have to follow that new law. So that's where we are. Okay. So, districts can request to waive almost any state law. I will go back here. There are 2 districts who have not waived class size. Don't remember which 2 those are. Over 90 of these districts have waived health and physical education. Districts have waived English as a second language instruction. So across the state, these districts have requested waivers. In exchange for the waivers, they say they are going to improve student achievement. Well, we all know that in spring of 2020 and spring of 2021, we basically did not have any state testing. So the waiver systems were supposed to have been evaluated this year. And we did have an impact there. Last summer, the state was saying that they were going to just grant everybody blanket waivers for everything. And we pushed back. So they extended the waivers for 2 years. So without any evaluation. That's okay. I'm going to stop sharing. But the important thing for everybody to know is that, yes, your system has waivers, unless you are in Mitchell and Beaufort City. And those waivers continue to be used to increase class size, to duty-free lunch. And they may have waivers that you aren't aware of what those waivers are. Okay. And I'm going to I'm going to share again, if you don't mind. If you do not know what waivers your system has, it is so easy, and I'm going to show you all this, to find. Go to Google and simply Google Strategic Waiver School System Georgia, and it is the first thing that pops up. And that is the system contracts. And so it will show you all of the systems, and I'll pick on DeKalb County because that's where I'm from. You click on the district, and then you can see DeKalb County. It just gives you a list, and this list is all the state laws and all the state board rules that DeKalb has waived. Okay, and so other districts, I'll go back, give you a little bit more information. I think Coweta was the one that was, nope, Coweta, yeah, Coweta, it gives you this long list, and then it gives you specifics about some things. What they say they're waiving. But that's where you find what all your district has waived. And don't assume that your district hasn't waived something if they're still following the state law or the board rule. For example, duty-free lunch. up and the waivers started in 2016. Up until 2020, almost every district that had a waiver from duty-free lunch was still giving their teachers duty-free lunch. But when we returned after the pandemic and they wanted fewer students in the cafeteria, all of a sudden, oh, no, we have a waiver and you don't get duty-free lunch anymore. So just because you haven't felt the impact of it yet, that doesn't mean your district doesn't have the waiver. And in order to change this, it's going to take legislation to eliminate the waivers. So if you have more questions, I'm kind of doing this kind of fast because we've talked about this and we've done this several times. So if anybody has questions about what their district is, I'll be happy to answer them. But know that your district has waivers and you need to know, for example, has your district waived fair dismissal? Because we do have some districts that have, and that has significant impact to you in your career, but also you want to know where you are moving forward and what we can do to eliminate these waivers. I have described it, and I think we're getting some legislators are hearing. They understand that it is an issue because they are now introducing new legislation with language in the new bills that they cannot be waived. But we do not have them yet to the point that they are ready to go back and deal with the previous waivers. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. Any questions?
Lisa, thank you so much for the clarity. Can you please just put in the chat or send us that website so we can look at it? I did see Rockdale and DeKalb.
Everybody's on there.
I
Yes,
see.
I will put the link to the state website in there where you can see them all. Yes, ma'am. I'll put that in the chat right now.
Thank you so much for all your hard work, President.
Thank you.
Next in the issues we want to make sure people are conversant on is TRS. And so Lisa Underwood is going to go through and share information about TRS. And I'm sure Debbie Simons, who's chair of the TRS Board of Trustees, will chime in if necessary or if not necessary. And Lisa, with part of what GAE Retired does is monitor the teacher retirement system of Georgia's meetings every 2 months. So Lisa, you are on.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to see everyone. And if you'll give me just a second, I will share my screen.
And Brian Westlake, while Lisa's getting her screen up, what is your question on retirement?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. Good morning, everybody. I have 2 related questions. One is, last year, if I understand correctly, a law was passed to allow retirees who have 30 years to come back full-time and receive both their pension benefits and a paycheck from the district. My understanding is that you have to be retired. You have to wait a year in order to come back in order to do that. One, I guess my question is, if that is correct, if my understanding is correct, why is there some kind of fiscal reason why they did that? Because it seems like a lot of people, after they wait a year, may figure out a way to make do with what they have and not come back. So it wouldn't necessarily address the shortage. So that's the first part of the question. The second part is, every year we have people who reach their 30 years in the middle of the school year and end up leaving the school. And then oftentimes their students end up with a long-term sub until the end of the school year. Is there, I don't understand why there isn't some incentive made to at least provide the pension benefits and the paycheck into the end of the school year to encourage that person not to retire until the end of the school year, to ensure that the students have a fully certified teacher, instead of in many of these districts, the students end up with a long-term sub until the next school year. So those are the two questions.
So Debbie, you look like you're chomping.
I'm trying to. Hey, Brian, it's really good to hear from you. Brian, first, the first question that I think I picked up that you wanted to know about is why you have to wait a year after you retire. That was a concession that was made to those persons, Jan Jones specifically, who wanted to make sure that people were not going to retire early just to get like a double paycheck. And so that was a legislative concession that was made. We did not, TRS was not in support of the full 30 years, because the average teacher in Georgia retires after 29 years. So that's still something that we can work on in the future. But to answer your first question, it's because it was a legislative concession. Legislators were concerned that teachers would retire the minute they reach 30 and be able to come right back into the classroom. Now, I will say this, during that 1 year that you are waiting to come back, if you want to work full-time, you can work part-time. That didn't have any impact on that at all. So a lot of us, like myself, when I retired, I worked 2 years part-time after I retired. You can still do that, but you do have to wait the full year. I've got to admit, I'm a little confused about your second question. Could you refine that a little bit more?
Sure. There oftentimes people end up meeting their 30-year because of sick leave and things like that. They could end up be qualified for retirement in the middle of the school year. So, okay. For example, my department chair, he retired 1 year a few years ago in December rather than at the end of the school year. His students were basically relegated to having a long-term sub for the remainder of that year. And my question is, why not at least up to a full year? If somebody's going to retire in the middle of the year, provide the incentive by allowing them to collect both the retirement benefits and the paycheck until the end of the school year, so the kids would keep a certified teacher instead of end up with a long-term sub.
Brian, they can do that. As a matter of fact, I did that. I retired in December and then came back as part-time retired in January. So I'm not sure why your department, unless you're just department chair just wanted to retire, there's not anything that prohibits a person from doing that currently.
So when you say part-time, you came back as a part-time staff member, or?
Yes, I came back as working part-time. Now, of course, that doesn't complete the full day, but when it's a high school situation, it would only be, they could come back and work 3 periods, during the year. There's not guaranteed, planning time. When you come back, you work a half a day. So that sort of gets to that factor. There would only be a couple of periods that would then have to be covered, but a fully certified part-time teacher could come back in and take over that position. So your department chair could have retired and come back immediately in January and taught at least 3 of the 4 periods they teach. So there's nothing that prohibits that. And
I get-
also, I'm sorry, that just one more, the longer you work over 30 years, you do have a monetary incentive. For every month that you work over, you are getting additional money to work towards your pension in retirement. So,
Right.
And Brian.
I get,
Brian, I invite you to go through and just chat with Debbie, if that's
Okay.
okay. So,
yeah, sure.
okay. And thank you for the questions. I'm appreciative.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie, and thank you, Karen.
Yep. Lisa, you're on.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. I want to talk to you about our teachers' retirement. That is a great benefit we have as educators. And right here, I've got a short video to start my presentation with the economic impact of the teacher pensions in Georgia. Okay. Never mind. Okay, hold on.
Lisa, do you want me to see if I can share that video?
Yes, please. It seems like it didn't work for me.
Okay. So let me stop you sharing a second. And sorry, I'm having a moment.
Yes.
Okay. It's always good when the technology works.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Here.
Educators do more than just teach. They fulfill a promise.
I've been getting paid $1,000 a month, if not more, just from this app on my phone. And I don't know if you can see this, but it's called Audible.
Okay,
Okay, so I'm going to show you right here.
Now.
I have a check from Audible. This is for $1,100.
Well, she's got it figured out.
Okay, we have skipped the ads, I hope. Here we go. Okay.
Just teach. They fulfill a promise to serve and strengthen our communities, all throughout their careers. At the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia, we think educators deserve a promise too. That's why we're dedicated to helping them retire with confidence and financial security, so they can impact their community even beyond their careers. In 1943, the State General Assembly established TRS to provide retirement security to those who dedicate their lives to educating Georgia's children and adults. Today, TRS is the largest public retirement system in Georgia. In fact, with $80 billion in assets, we're ranked in the top third of all pension funds. We manage hundreds of thousands of active retirement accounts. And while TRS pays more than $5 billion a year in benefits to retired members and their beneficiaries, approximately $8 billion is pumped back into the local communities in the state of Georgia. You see, TRS doesn't only help teachers, we also help to boost our local economy. Every dollar paid in state and local pension benefits goes on to generate an even greater total output. Say a retiree receives a pension payment, then uses it toward the purchase of a home. From contractors and builders to mortgage brokers and real estate agents, everyone involved is put to work, earning and spending money in our local economy. That in turn means even more business, more hiring, more jobs, all right here in Georgia. And remember, the majority of funds in our members' accounts comes from investment income. But unlike 401k and 403b plans, pensions aren't tied to the stock market. Whether stocks go up or down, TRS benefits stay the same from month to month for stability retirees can count on. Our teachers' careers start with a promise. With the Teachers Retirement System of Georgia, their retirement does too. Because the way we see it, A pension is a promise our members can rely on and retire on. Visit trsga.com and learn more today.
Lisa, are you there? I've lost.
The state of Georgia maintains
Whoops.
two systems for employees in public schools.
Whoops.
Okay, I'm going to go find my screen to share it again.
System.
Oh, I'm in technical. Okay, here we go. Well.
I can pull up the PowerPoint if you want to say next screen, whatever works for you.
Okay, and I'm just trying to get back to the share, and I have ended up someplace where.
You're sure?
Okay, I'm back.
Okay,
Okay, I can share my screen now.
good. At least this isn't for a TEKS evaluation or anything like that.
I know, right? I have done Google Meet a lot. I haven't really ever done this with Zoom before. Oh, and I just can't find my screen. Okay,
You
I've got it. Yes,
Okay.
I have found it. Okay, can you see this?
Not yet.
And you still can't see it?
Are you at the bottom of the Zoom panel and there's the green share screen
And
button?
that's what I'm on. It says share screen.
Okay, and when you
Okay,
open
maybe-
that- yeah,
Can you see it now?
yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Sorry for the delay. And that was a great video to open this presentation. Okay, and this is just to give you an overview of our financial standings. As of November 2022, our TRS had 86 plus billion in assets. Okay, we had 245,878 actively contributing members. Those are the people who are currently working in our schools, contributing to the TRS pension. And we have 145,129 retired members who are receiving checks from the pension, from TRS. Okay, as of, you can see here, this is the total benefit recipients. And from October 1st, 2022 to November 1st, 2022, it varied just a little bit. You know, we may have had, a few more people retire to increase that number from 145,059 to 140,129. Okay, the average monthly benefit as of November 1st, as you can see, was $3,501. The average service credit, as I think Debbie alluded to earlier, most people think that teachers all work 30 or more years. As of November 1st, the average service credit was 25.51, about 25 and a half years. So many teachers do not work all the way, all the 30 years. The average age of retirement is 59. We all know those lucky people who started when they were 22 years old, who can retire when they're 52, but a lot of people came into the profession later, like I did, or they came into the profession and then they took some years off to stay home with children. So the average age of retirement is 59. Average age at payment, and to make sure I understand this correctly, I think this is just the average age of all of our retirees. Okay, together, so averaging it all out. We've got some retirees, who are in their 90s. I believe we've got several who are over 100 years old. And then we've got 10. Yeah, we've got 10 retirees who are 100 or more years old, which is terrific. Okay, the total benefit payroll as of November 1st is $489.2 million. Okay, and with the EFT, I'm not clear on that one.
That's the number of retirees who get their check deposited automatically and do not get a paper check. Some people, maybe those over 100, are holding out for the paper check.
Gotcha, and I do remember that now. All right. Okay, next we'll discuss the difference between a defined benefit and a defined contribution plan. Okay, and then we'll talk about the TRS formula, and then we'll discuss how TRS is funded. Okay, a defined benefit versus a defined contribution. Comparing these two types of pension plans. I have a short video to talk about how a pension plan works. And hopefully this will. Perhaps it's not a video.
Yes,
Okay.
just scroll down a little bit. Scroll down a little bit more.
Okay.
There is a video there.
Okay.
It's more towards the top, Lisa.
Okay. I didn't find this yesterday when I was looking through it.
I'm gonna share if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay. Let's see if this will do it. Okay. This is really short. Oops. It's saying I have a problem with my internet connection. Maybe I'm not doing this. Okay. Well, I'll put the link to the video in the information I send to people. The video was less than a couple minutes long, so technology really is our friend, but maybe not so right this second. Oh, here we go. Click to play. Here we go. Start screen. Okay. Loading ad, great. Hopefully the ad will go.
Tonight at 7, 6 o'clock, you see my rocket ship head up in the clouds.
3, 2, 1. Okay, here we go.
A pension plan is a retirement savings plan where an employer maintains a fund on behalf of its employees for their retirement. The money in the fund is usually invested in long-term, low-risk growth investments. The plan is typically tax-deferred, which means the contributions made to the plan are not subject to income taxes, and in addition, the investment income of the retirement fund is also not taxed. Taxes are only paid once money is taken out of the fund in the form of retirement income payments. This tax advantage provides employees with a lucrative way to defer part of their current wages and salary to retirement savings where it can be used as retirement income. Generally, there are two types of retirement plans: defined benefit plans and defined contribution plans. A defined benefit pension plan is a more traditional, older style of pension plan where workers' retirement benefits are calculated and thus defined by a formula that takes into account their years of work at the company and their salary history. The employer controls the plan and the plan assets and guarantees that the employee will receive a certain amount of retirement compensation no matter what their performance was for the underlying assets in the plan. A defined contribution plan is the more modern type of pension plan. Most people are familiar with these types of plans through making 401k contributions. In these types of plans, the employee controls the amount contributed to the plan as well as how the funds are invested. Retirement benefits depend on how the fund assets perform and grow.
Okay. Okay.
So then do you have it as the PowerPoint TRS? Is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And then we just went through this part.
So go back. Yeah. to
Yes.
power- And then just hit next.
Okay.
slide on that. Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
So then, okay, so in our video, we just learned about our defined benefit. So our retirement income stream as teachers with the TRS is a guaranteed. I mean, it's our paycheck. We know what it's going to be. If you went into the website right now to find out what your retirement paycheck would be, you could get that information. So that would help you with your planning, and it will not change. It will not go down. If you are retiring with your 401k, that is dependent on the stock market. If you have investments currently in something like VALIC or Lincoln or some other 401, some 401b plan, you know that you took a pretty good hit when our economy has gone through some of the problems it's had when the stock market went down. Okay. With the defined benefit, our employer is responsible for investing the contributions. When you have your 401k, you're responsible for investing your contributions. You select what you want it to be invested in. If you want high risk, high growth, you are responsible. Again, with your retirement with TRS, you will know exactly what your paycheck will be. When you have the defined contribution, it's going to depend on what the stock market does. If the stock market goes down, you're going to lose a lot of your assets. If it goes up or has high growth, your assets will increase. Our defined benefit, TRS, we are protected with inflation. We're protected against the economic downturns that we experience, and our income remains safe. With your 401k, your benefits are not guaranteed. When we have inflation or we have a downturn in the stock market, your income is going to take a hit. Okay, one of the values of a defined benefit plan, this is the great recruitment tool for people to come into the education profession. This is one of the reasons, like I said, I did come into education late. I knew a lot of people who were teachers, and they kept talking about their great retirement, the retirement. I have family members who retired, and I could see the kind of lifestyles they had. This is a great recruitment tool to get people to come into the profession. Retention is another reason to have this great defined benefit plan. At one of the TRS board meetings, one of the things that we talked about, we have some teachers who maybe by the time they get to 15 years, they start feeling kind of tired or maybe burned out. And that's a period of time that they really are making thoughts about leaving the profession. This is a good time for teachers to go check and see what their retirement's going to be like. And then they can see the kind of income they're going to have if they stay, and hopefully will not leave the profession. The most productive years teachers have are the years 20 to 25. So if they leave before that, we're losing those great productive years. Retirement with dignity and honor. when you know what your income is going to be and you know that it's not going to go down, you're able to make plans that, to have your great retirement. You can plan your trips, you can plan vacations, homes, whatever you want to do, your hobbies, because you know what your income is. Okay, now next we're going to talk about the TRS formula. Okay, for our normal retirement, service retirement, you need to have 30 years of credible service regardless of age. Like I said, those 22-year-olds, they can retire at 52 once they have 30 years. Or you need to have at least 10 years of credible service and be at least 60 years old. So a lot of these people who are retiring at 25 years, they were 60 years old to be able to do that, at least 60. At least 10 years of service, or be at least 60 with 10 years. Okay, next we're going to talk about the formula. Okay, you have your years of credible service, including partial years, times 2%. You have 2% of your income for each year of credible service. That's the multiplier. And then you have your highest average salary. And then that equals your maximum benefit. Your maximum benefit is subject to taxes and deductions such as your health care. All of those things are going to come out of your teacher's retirement check. Okay, so if you have 30 years of service times 2%, you have your highest average salary. For example, if it's $50,000, then you have your maximum benefit would be, let's see, make this go away, would be $2,500 per month or $30,000 per year. If you had 40 years of credible service with your 2% multiplier, your highest average salary of $60,000, for example, your maximum benefit would be $48,000 per year or $4,000 per month. Okay, teachers can also, well, not just teachers, but educators can accrue unused sick leave credit. If you have 20 days of unused sick leave, you have 1 month of service. 9 months of sick leave credit is 1 year of service. For example, my husband retired with 30 years. He had 2 years of sick leave credit, so his retirement benefit reflects 32 years of service. I retired after 25 years. I had 1.5 years of sick leave credit built up, so my retirement is based on 26.5 years of service. Okay, then we had House Bill 109. This was in 2020, unused sick leave credit for educators employed after July 1st, 2020, not counting towards retirement credit. Okay, one of the reasons is a great idea to let teachers apply sick leave credit towards their retirement is it gives them incentive to get up and come to work on that day. They feel like taking a mental health day. Instead of staying home, they go ahead and go to work. They tried in 2020 to change that for teachers coming in after that date. It failed. That did not pass. Okay, next we have our cost of living adjustments. We have, was there a question? Or comment? Okay. All right, retired educators with TRS receive a 1.5% cost of living increase every January and every July. All right, there was legislation again in 2020 with House Bill 109, where the wording would be changed to 3% or less COLA awarded annually. that failed. Again, this is where our retired educators are very, very helpful. When I was I was in the school building when this legislation occurred, and I knew about it. I sent off a couple of emails. I didn't have time to do very much about it. Our retirees did. They bombarded our legislators and made this fail. And now I'm one of the retired, so I'm going to help with those things as well. Okay, pension reform. And you can see this, there's been many different ways that legislators have worked to reform our pensions. They've tried to mess with our sick leave. They want to change the multiplier where it's not necessarily 2% for each year. They keep wanting to mess with our minimum age to retire. Those people who were started when they were young and have 30 years at the age of 52 can retire. There has often been, talk about trying to make teachers stay in the classrooms longer. There's all of these things have happened. I mean, there's been lots of talk about all of these things happen. And so far we have been successful in stopping these negative pieces of legislation from passing. Okay, this is how the legislation works. Retirement legislation that has a fiscal impact can only be introduced during the first year of a 2-year session and can only be acted on during the second year. They can't bring something in 1 year and pass it that same year. Okay, this is House Bill 173. This was in 2021. And if somebody would like to jump in and talk about this one.
What was passed is that TRS investments could be put into alternative investments. Prior to this legislation, they could not be. And there's a 5% cap as the amount that could be put into alternative investments. And Debbie, I don't think we're at 5% yet with some of these suggested alternative investments.
No, we are not, Karen, and that's because we have an additional requirement of not being able to invest more than 1% a year. So we are just now entering into our third year, and we have not even quite 2% because we are being very methodical and very careful about how we are investing this money.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay. In 2022, House Bill 385 was passed that allowed retired teachers to return to work. Again, that was in order to address our teacher shortages. And we did have a good many teachers who were retired who, when that legislation passed, did go back to work, which was great. It was a great thing for our students to have certified teachers.
And Lisa, if I'm not mistaken, the teachers who can return to work after a 1-year hiatus are only in critical needs areas as defined by the local resource. So it's just not everybody who has retired having the option to return to work at 100% and drawing the TRS pension simultaneously.
And it did help us. I retired from Doherty County School District, and it did help us when that legislation passed because every single school in our district had vacancies. So, we had a 3rd grade elementary teacher come back out of retirement to come teach because we did have vacancies in all of our schools. And that was very helpful to have those teachers be able to come back to work. Okay, next we're going to talk about how TRS is funded. Okay, bucket 1. And then we have bucket 2 and bucket 3. Bucket 1 is the employee's contribution. Each month you see on your paycheck, X amount of dollars that went from your paycheck to TRS. And then bucket 2 is the employer contribution. That is what your school district contributes for your teacher's retirement. And then you put those together, and all of those money go into investments, which we were just talking about, and Debbie and Karen explained that expanded on that. But the money is invested, and you can see that the investment income, the money earned from the investments, is where most of your retirement comes from. Your employer contribution is very small compared to what you are getting out of this. Okay, and this chart just shows the employee rate over time. As you can see, since 2013, the employee has contributed 6% every year. Before that, it was 5.53. And then you can see over time, how much the employer rate has gone up, or their contributions have gone up. In 2011, the employee rate was 5.53% of your paycheck you contributed, and your employer did 10.28%. And this past year, the employer rate was 6%, and the employer rate was 19.81%. So your employer contributes more than you contribute to your teacher's retirement. Okay.
And I think the next couple slides just illustrate the employer rate as you were talking about, Lisa.
Yes. Okay, and then for fiscal year 2024, the employer rate is 19.98% and the employee rate remains 6%. And this is kind of blurry. Okay, and our net position is the amount of money in our TRS fund. And you can see that in November last year, our net position was 103.0 billion dollars, and that had gone up to $105 billion. And then it went down, when our economy really tanked back in June, it went down to 87, and then it went back up a little bit. It rallied some this summer and got back up to 92 billion. In September, it went back down to 82 billion. And then in October, it went back up to 86 billion. When I attended the TRS board meeting in November, the report, actually, they indicated that as of that date, and it was back up to 89 billion. There will be another TRS board meeting in a couple of weeks, and I will be attending that meeting as well. And then I write up a report, and it's shared in a number of places in the No Magazine and different newsletters so that you can keep track of how we're doing. We can have in our previous 10 years, this is how our net position went up. And we have gone down a bit right now, but if you look in 2013, we only had $58 billion in our fund. So the fact that we are back down, that we're down to 89 billion compared to 100 billion, we're still in a very good position. We're still really in great shape because just in 10 years, we've moved up substantially in our net assets. Okay. Investment income, as we just said, accounts for the majority of your pension income. And here's an example. 2010, you have a retired teacher who retired at age 59. The employee contributions were 12%. Teacher put in a total of $46,199 over his or her career. The employer contributed $92,861 for that employee over the course of their career. So you had the state funds, $50,000, and the local, federal, and other sources account for 46% of that employer contribution. Investment income, however, contributed over this 10 years since this teacher retired, actually 12 years, contributed 231,513 or 63% of the income. So benefit payments received by this teacher since retiring in 2010 was 370,563. That is a great return on the $46,000 that teacher invested in his or her retirement. And the person's still going. Okay, so this number, this bottom about payments received will continue to grow, especially if the person lives to be 100.
And that goes into the PSERS, which Lisa will talk about in just a minute. So Debbie, do you have anything you want to add to what Lisa shared? And thank you, Lisa.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
The only thing I wanted to add was the current day legislative arena that we're getting ready to go into, and Lisa gave a real good foundation for the few points I want to make. There are 3 words I want to put into your heads that if you hear them, they should set off alarm bells. A tiered retirement system, a hybrid retirement system, or a DC, defined contribution system. There appears to be attempts to change our total defined benefit program to one of those 3. The only way that I know of they can do it is on new hires. And the explanation to that is going to be, it won't affect you. You that are currently in the profession, those of you who are currently hired, we're not going to mess with your benefits. That is a lie. When you look at it, we have 3 parts that are funded. We have the employee contribution, the employer contribution, and we have the investment returns. If you switch to any of those tiered, hybrid, DC plans, that one of those legs to that stool is going to become shorter and shorter every year. Now, you know what happens if you go from an even-keeled 3-legged stool to one of the legs being significantly shorter. It will fall. So my basic message to you is, if you hear this discussion on tiered, hybrid, or defined contribution, that's when the alarm bells go off. I know that Joe and Tony and Karen, Dr. Evans, Lisa Underwood, Lisa Morgan will all be watching for these words. But if you get into a discussion or you hear that discussion, that's when you should become alarmed.
Thank you, Debbie. And again, you're just the messenger. And I just got goosebumps when you said all that, because I think we will be being alarmed this year. So we're going to move on. And Lisa, if you'll talk briefly about PSERS, and then we'll finish up with the national level.
Okay.
And Jeff Hubbard with his cap on for the Georgia game. So Lisa, you're on first.
Okay, so I will go quick because I know Jeff, just keep showing us that lovely blue sky, that warm temperature. Yeah, okay. For those of you that don't know, Jeff's in California. What Debbie just said about alarm words, I've already heard them from legislators. I've heard them twice at the 2 meetings that happened in December. So we need everybody to be prepared. We are going to have to fight these battles to protect our teacher retirement system. But what I want to say, all the great good things that we heard about our teacher retirement system, we have an almost exact opposite situation for some of our ESPs. Okay. So that's the thing. Everybody has to please understand that the public school employees retirement system is only for bus drivers, cafeteria workers, custodians, and maintenance personnel. Okay, this is by law. This system was created in 1970, and it was intended that this was to be a supplemental retirement system for these workers because they were seen as part-time workers who this would not be their main retirement income. I know the custodians and the maintenance personnel, my school system, work 40 hours a week, 12 months a year. They are full-time employees. Our cafeteria workers work much more than part-time, and our bus drivers as well. So PSERS is a defined benefit, but it is a very low defined benefit. The average monthly benefit right now for someone who retired under this system is $290. That would not even pay a single person probably groceries for a month. There's 52,000 ESPs currently in this program. If they are the head custodian, if they are a management position within PSERS, then those members are in TRS. So that's why we see many times someone will get a promotion in the cafeteria and become the cafeteria manager, then they move into TRS. And so one of the reasons then that you will see someone continue to work as the cafeteria manager for at least 10 or 15 years is because they move into TRS and they are vested. Monthly benefits in PSERS, it's a specific dollar amount determined by the General Assembly each year. Effective July 1st, 2022, it's $16. So if you work 30 years, you get $16 per year per month. So that would be $480 per month if you had worked 30 years. That was a 25-cent increase over 2021. The PSERS, there has been recommendations in several reports that have recommended changes to this system. There is a state cap on this system at $16.50. And one of the things that is in PSERS, the employees, I'm going to stop sharing, the employees pay much less than what we do in the TRS system. In TRS, the employee portion is 6% of our salary. In PSERS, it's a flat $10 per month. Up until 2012, it was a flat $4 a month. So in 2012, they knew then they needed to improve PSERS. They increased the employee contribution by more than double. However, the benefits have not more than doubled since then. The other thing that is unique to PSERS, our local systems do not pay any part into PSERS. The state pays the full employer portion. So one of the things that from a GAE perspective is we need to be working with our local systems. They are not paying anything for retirement for these employees. So this is a local issue that we need to be working through our local boards saying, wait a minute, you're not paying anything toward these employees' retirement. You should be doing something for them. And obviously this is not the PSERS and improving this system or changing this system. That it's going to be a long term. It's not something that's going to happen immediately. And I see Debbie nodding, and it's something that's going to have to be done with a lot of thought and careful consideration about what the impact is going to be on everyone. I personally know someone who was in PSERS as a cafeteria worker, became a cafeteria manager. She's now in TRS as a cafeteria manager. She cannot afford to bring her years in PSERS. So that's where we have to look at what we can do. And the question was put in the chat. So even if, yes, no matter the multiplier, the factor is, it's not $16.50 right now, Tiffany, it's $16 an hour. Doesn't matter how much they're making. They are, when they retire, if they retire right now, they get $16 per year of service. So you just take 16, multiply times the number of years they worked. So if 30 is an easy one to do, they worked 30 years, they would get $480 per month as their retirement. And the $16.50 is the maximum it can be increased to. So the legislature has increased it by a quarter, basically pretty much every year over the past 5 years. If they did that this year and next year and get to $16.50, we are going to have a law to then a bill to increase that multiplier. And that is something that we've already asked the committee to do. And yes, Lisa Underwood, a lot of these employees are in systems that do not participate in Social Security. So it is another hit. And I know Jeff's going to talk about those issues when he talks about federal, but these are our members. These are our coworkers. These, I know the value, and I think everyone else here knows the value of these ESPs. We would not be having school if the bus drivers weren't picking the kids up, if the cafeteria workers weren't feeding them breakfast when they got to school, custodians weren't keeping the building clean, and heaven knows when the right now heat goes out, we are also thankful for those maintenance personnel that come and make sure that things are running in our buildings. So they deserve a dignified retirement, and they don't have that right now. So that is something we will be continuing to work on and push on for those members.
Lisa, again, thank you for being
Yes.
the messenger. on
Yes.
this. And this is obviously something that we need to work towards remedying. This is unconscionable in my humble opinion. So
Yes.
thank you. As we close out today, I would be remiss if we didn't share just a little bit about what is happening on the federal level. And I'd like our NEA director from Georgia, Jeff Hubbard, to share. And again, Jeff, if the Bulldogs do not win and you're in LA, I am holding you responsible. Go Dogs.
Good morning, and thank you, everyone, from one of the happiest places on earth, Disneyland. So if you hear Disney music or little kids crying, it's because I guess they're not on one of Mickey's rides. So from NEA President Becky Pringle, Vice President Princess Moss, Secretary Treasurer Noah Candelaria, Happy New Year. and I would say greetings from the 118th Congress, but they officially still haven't been sworn in yet. So a couple of things I want to talk about. To learn more about our national issues, I invite our members to go to NEA.org. And when you go there, if on the left-hand side of the home screen, if you'll click Advocating for Change, and then go down to the Action Center, you will see many of the issues that NEA worked on in the 117th Congress, and that we will be pushing for passage and working on the 118th Congress. If you are app savvy on your mobile phones, I invite you to download ED Activist, ACTIVIST. That is the app that NEA uses for our 3 million members nationwide to go online and be able to contact your senators and your representatives when action alerts come forth. As of now, there are 5 main issues that we're looking at as we begin the 118th Congress. And the first one, as we've talked about earlier today, regarding Social Security, is the repeal of the GPO-WEP, Government Pension Offset Windfall Elimination Provision. There are many systems in Georgia, and we just applied the full list to Senator Ossoff and Warnock's offices of the school systems in Georgia which do not participate in Social Security, and or because of that, offset your pension if you're in a non-pension system, Clayton, Rockdale, DeKalb, Gwinnett. Also, we have the windfall elimination provision in which a person can lose spousal benefits and have that offset because of the fact that they're collecting a pension from a government agency. Sadly, we had 305 co-sponsors for this bill from Rodney Davis from Illinois in the 117th Congress. No one, however, signed the petition, since it had over 270 members, for Speaker Pelosi to bring it to the floor. We were deeply saddened about that, but we do celebrate the fact that we did have 305 out of 438 members sign on to the legislation. Our efforts will begin again once we find a new sponsor. Unfortunately, Representative Davis from Illinois was defeated for re-election by a supporter of former President Trump. And so we are looking for another Republican member to bring this forth. This will be one of our main federal legislative goals in the 118th. The next one is the fully funded education formula for IDEA. It is shameful that we have never funded IDEA to the full 40%. When I was state president, we had it at 18%. Sadly, now it has actually dropped between 13 to 14%. Too much of the special education funding is put upon our state departments of education and our local departments of education. And this is just a travesty. So we will be working towards full funding on IDEA. The next 2 things directly involve our children. The Child Nutrition Act, because of the fact that Georgia is an agricultural state primarily, we actually receive a lot of funds not only for the children in regards to providing for free and reduced school lunches, but also for the fact that many Georgia farmers and produce companies are able to take part in the federal school lunch program. So not only do we get supplemental assistance for our children, but it also helps improve the Georgia economy. So we will be pushing that again very much, especially through Congressman Bishop of the 2nd. The next thing we're looking to have extended is the child tax credit. It brought many people out of the range of poverty through the assistance that the federal government provided. We will be asking that program is extended. The last thing that we'll be working on in this Congress to begin the 118th will be our continued efforts on the Electoral Count Reform Act, in which we're trying to reform the fact that a state such as Wyoming, with less than 750,000 residents, and literally less than the local that I'm president of, Cobb County, has literally more influence on the electoral map than the state of California on a per citizen per vote basis. So those are the 5 things that we're going to be working on actively. What I ask is that if you do not download the Ed Activist, at least when GAE sends out the action alerts and NEA sends out the action alerts, that you make sure you do contact Senator Ossoff, contact Senator Warnock if it is a Senate piece of Senate legislation, and if it is a piece of legislation in the House of Representatives, that you contact one of our 14 representatives. I will go back and end on this. With the GPO WEP repeal bill, I'm very happy to report that 8 of the 14 representatives in the last session did support it. Now, we do have several supporters who are no longer in the Congress. We will be going to those new representatives and actively seeking their support. President Morgan and I will be on Capitol Hill in February, and I've actually asked NEA for permission to go up early because of the fact that due to COVID, we were not able to conduct face-to-face with all 16 members of the Georgia congressional delegation. But if you have any questions or concerns regarding federal issues, please do not hesitate to contact me at jeff.hubbard@gae.org or at rjhubbard61@gmail.com. Once again, on behalf of President Pringle and President Morgan, thank you for allowing me to have the time to speak this morning. And again, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. If you have questions or concerns regarding pieces of federal legislation, I can reach out to the NEA Director of Government Relations, Mark Egan, to get you information and answers. If there's any questions, Karen, I will stand for them. Actually, I'm standing now, and I hope the Disney music didn't disrupt this too bad. But thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. And of course, go Dogs.
Jeff, thank you. And thank you for taking time out of Disneyland, literally, to be with us.
Go
this
Dogs.
evening.
Well, I haven't went on a ride yet. I've made it onto the tram, but now that I have finished, I'm actually going to drop off the call because I have a 9 a.m. reservation to ride Guardians of the Galaxy.
Go forth and conquer, Jeff. I'll send you any questions that are put in the chat. And don't forget, somebody said to get your Mickey Mouse ears. So we'll leave it at that.
I already have my marching orders for my daughter to get matching ears, so I will be doing that. So y'all have a wonderful day. Go Dogs, and I'll see everybody back in Georgia soon.
Thank you, Jeff. Good luck.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
As we finish up today, I want to introduce the chair and one of the co-chairs of the GAE Retired Legislative Committee. So Linda Wolf-Smith and Vivian Brooks, you are on.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone again. As we begin, I do want to send my heartfelt thoughts with President Tony Smith as she celebrates the life of her sister who passed early this year, right after Christmas. Moving on, we've had delight to have Vivian Brooks added to the Legislative Committee.
Linda, you just muted yourself, so go back after you said that Vivian was added to the Legislative Committee.
Cool. Vivian, along with Judy Polachek, also Cyril Hampton, Patrick Crabtree, and Sandra Hawthorne. Vivian, I'll let you go on and continue with anything you have to say on WEP and also what we've been doing since last year this time. And then I'll come up with the follow-up of where we go from here.
Okay, my camera's not on, but yes, it won't come on. Okay, that's okay though, I'm good. The National GPO Web Task Force is something that I am monitoring for GAE Retired partners with the Alliance for Retired Americans to address GPO Web. And GPO Web
Vivian, For me, your sound is going in and out.
Oh,
So,
okay.
if you could perhaps just stay focused on your microphone, that would be good.
Okay. Let me move closer to my mic. Okay. Okay, GAE partners with the Alliance for Retired Americans. Can you hear me now? To address GPO WEP, which GPO WEP are two Social Security penalty laws that affect people in public service, such as teachers, ESPs, firefighters, law enforcement, postal workers, and others. The task force makes strategic plans every week to contact legislators. So Lobby and Learn is very, very important to us because Karen has it every year and it teaches us how to interact with legislators. So as I said, the task force makes plans every week. They tell us which legislators to contact, in addition to our own legislators, and also give us talking points and etc. Patrick Crabtree and I attended the National Repeal GPO WEP Task Force DC rally, in which we were able to meet with legislators, assistants, and talk with them about GPO WEP and make them aware of it and how it affects teachers. We also, with the task force, they give us all the information about the different bills, like House Bill 82, which would repeal both GPO and WEP penalties. And we tried, but we were not successful, but we tried and we made a lot of progress on trying to get those GPO and WEP repeals heard. For next year, we are going to continue working with legislators to try to get GPO WEP repealed. And one thing that we are considering is working with the U.S. Department of Education, and we contacted Miguel Cardona, the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education, and he was sent a letter from the task force explaining that a lot of teachers are not aware of the GPO laws until they are close to retirement or they are retiring. And there is a form that the federal government has issued from Social Security that school systems are supposed to give to new hires to let them know about how GPO WEP would affect them. And that letter was given out in the early 2000s, but it has been noted that a lot of teachers are not receiving that letter before they sign their contracts as new hires. So we're also gonna task force is gonna contact, we're asking the U.S. Department Secretary of State to contact Social Security and work with them on that issue. So we are going to try to inform teachers and other public service workers more about how GPO WEP affects them. So we have a lot of call to actions that the task force sends out. They also have a Facebook page and a socialsecurityfairness.org website where you can get information about GPO WEP and also about different bills, House bills and legislations that affect GPO WIP. Daniel?
I don't think Daniel has joined us, so,
Oh.
which is fine. Linda, Vivian, do you want to, finish, closing us out?
Oh,
And Linda, you're gonna unmute, I can tell.
I know my fifth grade teacher would have wished for that button. Anyway, Vivian has developed a PowerPoint that I would ask her to send to Karen so that you can send it to the participants. Because in that PowerPoint, we attempted to show everything we've done since last year. We had a grant that was called #GAE Retired Call to Action. And it was under the banner of our rapid response team. And it is a pictorial of just about everything that we did. I want to thank Vivian for developing that PowerPoint, and today has been so impactful. It's okay if it's not shown today, but we will send it to Karen, and I'm sure Karen will get it out to everybody that's here. But in closing, I wanted to talk about where do we go from here. On February the 7th is the GAE Retired Day at the Capitol. We are going to change it, not dramatically, but since COVID, we have been virtual. And what I need for everyone to do is to go to their My Voter page, as well as the Georgia State Legislature, and look at the retirement committee and look at the education committee, because right now the plans are for that day at the Capitol is to take a break intermittently. So you can email or text your legislator. And I think the other items will be valuable in terms of our day at the Capitol, but I believe that as chair, our most vital impact is to let them hear from us on that day. We used to go down as a body, and we would go in under the Gold Dome, and we would make appointments prior to coming. We can still do that, but we've got to find a way to make all the work that we have done this past year with the elections, with our trainings, be fruitful in that we use this education that we've gotten today and our years of involvement to task. They know us, but they've got to hear from us, whether it's by face, email, text, phone, or whatever. So that's what we're working on. So please, if the notice is not already out, because we're on Mobilize now, thank you, Lisa, that you can sign up for the GA and Karen for the GAE Retired Day at the Capitol, and just do a little homework on your downtime and pull up those two sites. I really want to thank the GAE Executive Committee and also those that guide everything that we do. In closing, we have one more grant that was awarded to us from NEA, and it's called Wind Beneath Our Wings. And it's devoted to bringing the early career educators. I've communicated with the president for the babies that are in college now, and the pre-retired and the retired, to all come together to keep our faces and our voice and our influence intact with GAE. Thanks again, Karen, for this beautiful program. And I've sent a text to somebody, a message to somebody to call me regarding PTA. I am an honorary member some years ago, and I think they need to hear from us as well. So thank you, everybody, for your participation today.
Linda, thank you. Vivian, thank you. As we really do close out, we are after the noon hour. Again, I will send follow-up from this meeting. You will have information about the legislative contact team session, the GAE Day at the Capitol, the GAE Retired Day at the Capitol. And Joe, when legislative session starts and we have issues, what should people do? What should they pay attention to? You get the final word.
So every day of the session, Lisa and I prepare a summary of the day's action and the activity that's coming up in the future. So we'll have one Monday, for example. It'll recap probably the elections and any news or intelligence that we pick up on. But as we go through the session, if you'll check your email, make sure you're getting our legislative updates or legislative alerts. That's where you'll find information. So for example, if there's an important hearing coming up on the teachers' retirement system, as soon as we know about it, you'll know about it. And then throughout the session as necessary, we'll be asking you to help us out. As Lisa pointed out earlier and Karen did as well, what really makes us a powerful and strong organization are our members, and that our members respond when there are issues of importance at the Capitol. So we'll be providing those again, updates of what happened that legislative day, what's coming up, and then occasionally, as we need it, asking you to call or email or come down to the Capitol and see your legislators.
Joe, thank you. I charge, invite, urge, cajole every one of us to respond early and often when we're asked to. Sometimes it's a rare thing a legislator will say, oh, I got 10 emails about blah, blah, blah. Well, I've heard in the last couple years, they're saying, I don't want any more to hear any more emails. And that's what we need to be doing on every issue, is communicating, telling our story. And thank you for being a GAE member. Thank you for being here this morning. Look for an email in the next few days from me. Have a lovely weekend, stay warm, and see you someplace soon, I hope. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.